Arrow and written by the new showrunner Scott Gimple. Before we get to the sponsor, before we get to the episode, what do you guys think of this episode and the return to The Walking Dead in general?
Overall, I like the season premiere. I thought we'll get to this more in kind of the show, but it felt more like a kind of an episode that jumps ahead in time rather than an epic season premiere episode, just in terms of how things are handled. But overall, I did like the episode, so yeah, certainly a strong premiere for what it is.
I liked it a lot. I was real happy to see them going with the new status quo and kind of taking us ahead in time a little bit to see how that kind of settled in and how that is all played out. I was very happy with it.
Yeah, I gotta say, the pacing of the first half of the episode rubbed me the wrong way at first, until I realized what they were doing, kind of lulling us into a false sense of security, allowing for everything to then simultaneously hit the fan. So in retrospect, I liked it a lot more than I did when I was actually watching the episode, but we'll get into all the specifics of that later on.
Like a dyslexic masseuse, it rubbed you the wrong way.
I don't have table setting to do, that's for sure.
That's true, yeah. Although I think it did it effectively, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Hey, Aaron, I hear you're in the market for some cheap comic books. Is that right?
Always.
Now, if I told you that there was a place where you could save 30, 40, 50% on your comic book and comic book related merchandise, would you be excited about that?
Not only would I be excited, I'd be like, tell me, where? Where is this?
Well, what if I told you that with a special code that we can give you, you could save even an extra 8% on top of the 30, 40, or 50% you'd already be saving?
Now you're talking crazy talk.
I feel like I'd be a fool not to accept this deal, honestly.
I can't disagree with you on that. And if you are looking for a deal like that, and quite frankly, listeners as well, if you're looking for a deal like that, go to dcbservice.com. That's dcbservice.com. They've got all your monthly comic books out there. Any book that's out that you want to check out, be The Walking Dead, Invincible, also by Robert Kirkman, The Avengers, stuff over at DC with Justice League and Batman and Superman. If it's out there on the shelves every week and every month, they've got it at dcbservice.com at crazy discounts. You can get number 1s at crazy discounts. You can get number 20 at a crazy discount. T-shirts and toys and other tie-ins to comic books. If it's comic book related, it's a good chance it's going to be on dcbservice.com. You can save 30, 40, 50% sometimes. And with our code WD8, you can save an additional 8%. That's if you're a new customer or if you haven't ordered in a year. Enter that code WD8 at dcbservice.com. Save yourself an additional 8% off of the already crazy deep discounts, and you can thank us later. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Alrighty. So gentlemen, what do you say we get into talking about the episode?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds like a winner.
Episode 401 is entitled 30 Days Without an Accident. Again, it was directed by executive producer Greg Nicotero, who's also behind many of the special effects on the show, pretty much all of the special effects on the show, let's be honest, and written by the new showrunner and executive producer Scott M. Gimple, who was also on The Talking Dead last night. Did either of you get a chance to watch The Talking Dead?
I watched a good chunk of it, actually, yes.
No, I did not.
I did not realize it was going to be an hour-long episode. I was emailing Jim saying, I'll be online in a few minutes, and I was like, oh, this keeps going and going and going. But I thought he was actually pretty fun at first. I see this guy sitting there, and he seems kind of nerdy and nebbish, and I'm like, oh, right. And then he was funny. Like, he had some legitimately funny things to say, and I liked his mannerisms.
He wrote my favorite episode of last season, Clear, the episode with Morgan, so I was really interested to see what direction he'd go this time.
Yeah,
and I agree. I think he could have a warm presence. I wouldn't say any of the other showrunners had a particularly negative presence, but yeah, he seems like he's certainly game to not only represent the show that he's the showrunner on, but also have a fun time with Chris Hardwick and Nathan Fillion. So.
Yeah, that was nice to see Captain Hammer / Mal Reynolds on the show as well.
Well, he's off for Canadian Thanksgiving, so he had time.
Alright, so this episode, as many of our season premieres, has a bunch of new characters, although I'd say probably has more than any other season premiere thus far, except maybe the original one. So we apologize if we stumble over any of the names as we go through the summary, but we start with Rick, who's out in a vegetable garden in front of the prison. They've really fixed things up. He's hoeing the ground, and he's digging in the garden and listening to music. Apparently they've got some batteries around.
Well, a good point that Mike Jones brought up, one of our listeners, is how the heck did he charge that iPod? But I'll let that go.
Batteries, man, batteries.
They found the old prison generator, of course.
Oh, of course.
Which has an iPod, adapter, obviously.
Naturally. I'm sorry.
And so he's digging around the garden. He finds a handgun, kind of buried in the earth. He picks it up. He looks at it a bit. He removes the magazine from the pistol, and then he throws the whole thing into the wheelbarrow. Carl comes up. His voice is now about 3 octaves deeper than it was last season. And he talks about this pig called Violet and saying that it's sick. And Rick tells Carl, A, you shouldn't be naming the pigs because they're food, not pets. And second, I don't quite know the reason why the pigs are sick.
Something I want to mention here real quick is the real change in Carl's manner, not only because he's obviously a little bit older since last time they filmed, but I mean, at the end of season 3, Carl was incredibly resentful of Rick. He had killed that kid, it was kind of a judgment call on his part, and Herschel, that kind of told Rick about it. There was a lot of tension between Rick and Carl, and now, at the beginning of this episode, it seems like all that is gone. It seems like they're communicating well, they're back to a point where they're respecting and liking each other, and I thought that was great. That's one of my favorite relationships in the story. I'm glad that they were able to progress that and patch it up, as it were.
Obviously, that has to do with kind of the time gap between episodes. I believe it's during 6-7 months, something like that.
That's what Mr. Gimple said during Talking Dead. He said it's been 6 to 7 months. He didn't get more specific than that. And that Rick has really spent that time dedicating his life to his son and his daughter, and not to going out and killing zombies and people like he had been for the last 3 seasons. It's been all about family for him since we left the prison.
And yeah, I hope that. I mean, I wouldn't, I guess, be opposed to seeing if there was any kind of flashback to this kind of transition period with the prisoners entering the Woodbury, along with Rick's transformation into where he is now versus where he was at the end of last season. But I do like that we kind of got past a lot of potential drama that could or could not be that interesting in favor of just picking up with this, what the status quo is in the present time for prison.
Right. So outside of the prison, Carol is also cooking breakfast for the residents. Daryl comes up and joins her. Seems he's been away for a little while on some missions or whatever. And we also meet one of our new survivors named Patrick, played by Vincent Martella, who's Phineas from Phineas and Ferb. We talked about him 2 episodes ago, I believe. And he seems to be as much of a Daryl fanboy as the internet is. And he comes up and he thanks him for the food, and he's such a big fan. He practically asks for an autograph, but instead he gets a handshake.
Well, they all kind of seem to be really enamored with Daryl. Like, a lot of them look up. I mean, we see Zach later, playing that guessing game with Daryl, was trying to figure out what he was in civilian life before the zombies happened, and he guessed he was a homicide cop, I mean, there's a lot of hero worship of Daryl to go around, I guess is the point I'm making.
It feels like the show definitely has kind of a meta sense of humor about Daryl, which is like the most it's ever done, something like that, where it gets that they know that Daryl is a big presence on the show. Obviously, the show's incorporating that kind of into the fandom within the prison as well as, outside of TV boxes, people watching all over the place, which is humorous to me. I enjoyed that aspect.
Yeah. Right. So Carol tells Patrick to continue on with cooking so she can talk to Daryl in private, and she mentions that they need people at the gates, they need to do a supply run, they need to make sure that they can take down the walkers, because for some reason, the walkers aren't really spreading out around the fence like they have been previously. Instead, they're kind of bunching up in a couple different areas, and the more walkers you have pressing against the chain link fence, eventually that fence is going to give, so she wants to get on top of that situation pretty quickly. We also check in with Glenn and Maggie, who wake up together, and Glenn tells Maggie he doesn't really want her to come with him on the supply run later in the day, and we'll get back to that later.
Right, he tells her that he doesn't want her to go along on the supply run, but he doesn't say why, and then we find out the reason later, as you say.
And I kind of guessed immediately like why, but I was happy they didn't drag it out past this episode and they kind of answered all those questions by the end.
Yeah, if it had been under Darabont's watch, it'd be like a subplot we'd see over the next year.
I completely agree with you, Jordan. I did kind of guess where that was going, but I was happy with the result of that scenario. That said, these kind of lighten up at some point. I'm hoping to see some more kind of energy from these two as a couple. Especially I like them because I do. I love Glenn. I love watching Maggie and Glenn together. So
yeah, and it's hard to tell. Like when we last left them, their relationship was not really in a great place, if memory serves. And you wonder, have they been doing really well in the last 6-7 months, and this just happens to be the last week or two, or have they been kind of on the outs the whole time? Which I hope not, because I like the two of them together.
I don't know. Last time we really checked in on them as a couple, I think they were doing it on the cement. I mean, that's
Right.
That's true. I guess they did kind of.
they made up after the. I mean, not that there's like it was more of a the governor did this to you. Ah, I'm angry about this, leading to squabbling. That's kind of weird, which was resolved with, as I said, doing it on the cement before the other dramatic things happened that didn't really involve them as a couple anymore for the rest of the season.
Right. So Tyrese goes out and to the fences, and we see a group of people, taking down the walkers who are gathering up on the fence. And Tyrese is talking to this woman, and I honestly did not recognize who she was until after the episode was over when I was reading a review, which is odd because they specifically pointed her out in the previously on the Walking Dead segment. But it's Karen, the one survivor of the governor's massacre.
Yeah.
So I should have recognized her. I was like, oh, okay, new character. But anyway, Tyrese tells her he really doesn't want to help with the fences anymore. It's kind of really eating away at his psyche. Like, he's fine taking down zombies in combat when it's doing it to survive, but when you're looking them in the face and just stabbing them over and over again, it's mechanical, it's monotonous, and it's kind of creepy, and he just doesn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, besides Tyrese building credit his way to just being my favorite character on the show, he's slowly earning that. I appreciated how Karen, the actress, Melissa Ponzio, she's gone from being random character that occasionally yells things at Andrea in season 3 to an actual player in this episode and presumably this series. So good for you, Karen. Like you've risen up in the world.
I think it's great. Tyrese is like one of my favorite characters in the books. I'm glad he's become one of my favorite characters in the show too.
I agree with that.
And so we can see that there's a bit of a relationship starting between Karen and Tyrese. We don't know too much about it, but they seem to be getting along together pretty well. We also catch up with Herschel, who apparently in the last 6 or 7 months they found a prosthetic leg for him, so he doesn't have to go around with crutches quite as much. He's got the kind of fit leg. I wouldn't say it's a perfect fit for him, which I mean kind of works within the story. You're not going to happen to find a prosthetic leg that perfectly fits, but it's doing the job. And he has a chat with Rick about planting crops when Michonne shows up. But I know you guys really liked one of the lines he told Rick while they were talking about planting the crops.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite line of the show is, we're gonna make a real farm out. You're gonna get your pair of overalls and a piece of hay to put in your mouth and maybe a bigger ass. I just thought that was funny. I always liked Scott Wilson's Herschel, and it was cool to see him be his his wry, wise self once again.
I agree, and I mean that's one of the key relationships on the series that I genuinely always enjoy. I think Herschel and Rick have some of the best chemistry on the show, along with a couple others that we'll mention.
So Michonne shows up and she returns from a mission, and it appears she's been going out periodically to search for the governor, which seems smart. But while she's out, she searches for supplies and all that kind of stuff. And she's brought back some comic books for Carl, which she makes him promise that when he's done reading them, she gets to. Which is a nice little character moment for her. We actually see her smile a couple times this episode, and she's not just glaring through gritted teeth like she was for most of last season, which is very nice.
Michonne no longer played by Grumpy Cat. Real quick, did there seem to be something between Rick and Michonne there, or was I just reading into it? It seemed like they were a little more familiar with one another than they were. I don't know.
If I had to, this is like kind of my own thought on it. I'd like to think that Michonne and Rick have a similar relationship to what kind of Daryl and Carol have, where they're not necessarily together, but I think they're comfortable enough around each other because they both have faced similar situations. If that makes any sense, it's like Michonne kind of she said that she hears things too in the episode Clear, just like Rick did with the phone and what have you. Like he sees stuff and hears things, and that'll make someone happy if I say that.
Stuff and things.
Stuff and things. And just like how I don't think Carol and Daryl are necessarily together, but I think they have kind of this understanding that makes them have a stronger bond than many of the others do, and that's kind of what I'm taking away from the Rick Michonne relationship right now.
And also now that Rick is not crazy anymore, or at least not nearly as crazy as he was last season, and she's become more comfortable with the group. I just think that their two personalities have had more of a chance to not be openly antagonistic towards each other, or just confused by each other. So Rick has had his issues, but he was never, at least in my opinion, like the hardest guy to get along with. If you weren't trying to kill him or he wasn't going insane, he's a reasonable dude. And Michonne, we know from the comics, although we don't really get to see it in the show, she's a very reasonable person as well for the most part. So once they're on equal footing, I was not surprised to see them be very civil. Whether or not they have a relationship beyond that, it didn't really cross my mind, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
No, they're also both survivors. They're also very talented fighters. If anything, that's the one kind of digression that Tyrese's character is taking from the comic, where in the comic, I think Jimmy agreed with this, Tyrese is more or less an equal to Rick as a kind of leader and fighter figure. Like in the show, he's not necessarily not wanting to go into a fight, but I mean expressing discomfort with killing off the fence walkers and whatnot. It's a bit different, but then again, the whole scenario is different with how we're
Plus in the book, I think Tyrese is more of a sounding board for Rick. Like when Rick makes a decision, he would run it past Tyrese in the book. I think Herschel's kind of taking that role here in the series as like his trusted advisor.
And his responsibilities are slightly different because in the book, Tyrese had a different relationship with another character that he brought with him as opposed to the sister who didn't exist in the book. That's me trying to be vague about spoilers for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, and it's interesting you talk about both. You talk about Tyrese being less, I don't want to say violent, but less go get him and actiony than he was in the books. Which we've seen previews where he is very actiony, swinging a giant carpet hammer. But I want to tie that into the next part of the scene, which is Michonne says she's going to go out and check the traps for any animals before the walkers get them. But Rick volunteers instead and says he'll go do it himself. But as he's leaving, Herschel tells Rick that the council, which is Herschel, Glenn, Carol, Daryl, and Sasha, which is a pretty good team, I think, they are going to insist that Rick take his gun along with him when he goes outside the gates for protection, which Rick seems reticent to do. So I wonder if the calming, if you will, of Tyrese is being done intentionally to mirror the calming of Rick, which is, Rick in the comics was always much more of a gung-ho, go get him, smashing some heads guy. And if this Rick in the show is being toned down some for story reasons, which I think are working just fine, having Tyrese be toned down in a similar way keeps them on similar footing and on similar ground.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll be interested, obviously, if this is the first episode of the fourth season, and the first episode where we really have them together on level footing, so I'll be interested to see where the season takes these characters as far as their relationship goes, and where Tyrese himself fits into the rest of the scheme of the season. So.
Right. It's interesting talking about the trailer footage that we have from San Diego Comic-Con. In past years, when you look at that footage, almost all of it is from the season premiere. But I noticed that there was a ton of stuff in those trailers that was not in this episode. And I thought that was interesting. They mixed it up a little bit more than in past years.
I think it's the first three, because I think the first, if I had to guess, I would say probably the first three episodes, and that's generally kind of how reviewers get screeners look at a number of a good chunk in advance just to kind of have a clear idea of how to review a show like this.
Right.
But also, I think last season what we had, it was entirely focused on Rick and the gang with no Andrea Michonne or Governor, and the second episode was entirely the Governor. Correct? Am I remembering that correctly? Or
that sounds right to me.
It's one of those. I mean,
it might have been the first one was a mix of the two of them on the road, and then Rick in the group. The second was just Rick, and the third the Governor and Woodbury, or it was the second, I forget. But you're on the right track.
With that said, yeah, I mean, last year we had footage of multiple episodes within one trailer because we knew we had images of the Governor and we had stuff of Michonne as well. So I mean, I see what you're saying for sure. Yeah, it did kind of mix a lot of stuff that we didn't see in this episode. It could actually be even further in the future because as far as the trailer for the season went, and what we saw is coming, like the Tyrese thing, for example.
So winter's coming.
Yeah.
So we have a supply group that's getting ready to leave and go get some supplies, and that's Zach, who is Best Boyfriend. Bob, Lawrence Taylor Jr., who's from The Wire originally, right, Aaron?
That is correct.
He's a character from the comics that apparently seems to be mirroring a lot of what his character was in the books in the show. Not in the things he does necessarily, but in some of his predilections, shall we say. And we can get into that as the episode goes on. But he volunteers to go along to earn his keep. We also have Sasha, who allows him to come, because like we said, Sasha's on the council. She's moved up into a leadership position, and she seems very reasonable, so that's good. They reach an abandoned army camp that appears to be some type of triage center as well. There's like stands for IVs and such. And this is around a big shopping mall, kind of a big Costco-style building. They draw out the walkers from inside the store before they go and get supplies. And this is where we have that scene where Zach is guessing at what Daryl did before the apocalypse, and his guess for this day, because apparently he has a different guess every day, was that Daryl was a homicide detective.
I really like the thought that went into how they cleared out those zombies too. And when they roll up on the Costco, there's a big hole cut in the fence, and it turns out that she had been there earlier, hooking a boombox to a couple of car batteries with the music that we hear to draw the zombies out. I thought that was I like the little practical applications that they use to like work around the zombie problem. I just thought that was a nice touch.
It certainly ties into what we saw last season, where at the beginning of last season, where you saw them clear out a house with minimal dialogue, with almost no dialogue, and just they seem very efficient about the work that they do in order to make sure things are safe before they investigate.
And here we see that they've spread that to the entire group. They've been teaching people.
Yes.
We always get annoyed in any horror movie, but definitely in The Walking Dead as well. You always hear the complaints whenever anybody makes a stupid decision, despite the fact that people in real life make stupid decisions all the time. That said, you get to see here now where they make all the right decisions, they don't do stupid things, and things still go wrong, but at least you can't go, oh, it's all because of that idiot Jerry or whatever, which is nice.
It just shows the attention to detail that I really appreciate. I mean, it would be really easy and lazy and to write it the way you're talking about Jordan, where that jerk Jerry, he ruined everything, and now so-and-so is dead, blah 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 blah. But I mean, this actually shows some thought on the part of the writers, like okay, if we really were in this situation, what would be the smart way to do this? What would be the practical way to get out, to deal with the situation? And I really appreciate that kind of thought in the script.
There were two little touches at the end of this that I enjoyed. One was Michonne saying, "I want to do this detective," because Michonne had a joke to say, and that always makes me happy because she's not just.
And she smiled, a big smile.
Yeah.
It was very nice.
It was pretty fun. I just like that cat scene. I want to do this detective. That was a good line for her. And the other is that we do get the shot of the threat that's going over the situation where you have the crashed helicopter on the top of the building. But what's clever about it is how they framed it. They showed Bob was kind of standing there, and they showed the half of the torso, and it's like, all right, so where's the other half? And they pan, the crane shot goes up, and then you see the other half of the torso, which is like this half of this guy that's still he's a walker, he's alive, he's like moving his hands around, and the rest of the walkers in the helicopter out there. It was just really cool. It was a really cool setup for what the potential threat is about this location.
Right, and as you're explaining, there's zombies all on the roof because it's kind of like built into a hill, this building, and then you got a helicopter crash, and it looked like a big, like a military cargo helicopter, right?
Yeah, it was
massive.
Yeah, it was a big one.
So they go in, like I said, after they hook up the boomboxes and they play the music to draw the zombies out, and they go in, they've got carts, they've got a plan. It all seems to be going pretty well, and we catch up with a few of the different characters as they go around the store until we get to Bob. Now, Bob Stookey in the comics was an alcoholic. Bob Stookey in the show also seems to have been an alcoholic at some point, where I guess that never really goes away. You just deal with it for the rest of your life, if I understand correctly. Hopefully I never have to find out for myself. But he finds a rack of wine bottles, full wine bottles, and he picks one up. He kind of looks at it for a bit, and then he puts it back down. There's dripping all around him from the ceiling. The ceiling does not seem to be particularly stable. And apparently neither is the rack. It started to rot away because of the constant water dripping on it from the cracks in the roof. And so when he puts the bottle back on the rack, the whole thing collapses and falls right on top of him. Bottles crash all around him. There's wine everywhere. He calls for the group, they go to help him, but the sound of the breaking bottles and his yelling alerts the zombies up top. They start walking around, and the roof, not just the part that was dripping, but the whole thing seems to be very weak from the water damage, coming from the cracks in the roof that came from the crashed helicopter. And all of a sudden, you have this whole group around Bob trying to help him out when zombies start literally raining from the sky. Parts of them, some of them hit the ground and just splatter like grape jelly. It was gross. Others are falling and their legs are snapping. Others are just fine. There were some really cool zombies. I love the one that when it hits the ground, the back of its skull just kind of stays stuck to the ground, so it lifts up. All the hair and stuff just rips right off of its skull. Kind of reminded me of the gas mask zombie from last year that I loved. Yeah. There's ones that are crawling around with broken ankles, kind of like a bicycle girl. There was a lot of cool zombies in here. So it just evolves into not really pandemonium. They're still doing their job and doing it well, but you have zombies falling out of all different parts of the ceiling, and there's no real plan that would allow you to prepare for that, and they're just fighting for their lives.
I love Hangman Zombie. That one, Hangman's intestines as a game.
That one was gross, dude. That was cool.
Which was there for a while until another one knocked it down. There's such great care that was put into like building these zombies and what it would be like for zombies that were rotting on a roof and I assume the hot sun for days, months, weeks at a time, whatever, and then falling into a giant building with a large fall in their way. It's such a fun, creative zombie action sequence, which the show always excels at the best. Like whatever misgivings I have about the show in general, it's never comes down to the zombies or the scenarios they get themselves in. Those are always just a lot of fun, very tense.
We also saw that in the scenes leading up to that, we kind of get the giveaway of what's going on with Maggie and Glenn by him looking at the portrait for your baby display, and then we also had that nice scene with Michonne where she walks up to the cardboard Frankenstein. Like she's kind of frightened by it at first and then cuts its head off anyway.
Which was really good continuity because if you remember, when the zombie apocalypse happened, it was like end of September, beginning of October, because Rick, that's about the time that Rick went into the coma. And so we have the Halloween decorations still up from inside the store, which is where they would be a month before Halloween. I thought that's a really good attention to detail and super creepy.
I like to think the show had that in mind and not just like thought, hey, we should put something weird in here for Michonne to cut up. But yeah, that's a good call.
Daryl notices that the roof is starting to cave in, and I think he can see through one of the holes the helicopter up there. So he and Zach go over, and they start getting Bob out from underneath of the rack as he's trapped. And they get Bob out, but Zach is bitten, and he gets killed in the process. And the rest of the group escapes just barely before the helicopter falls through, which pretty much destroys them all and kills most, if not all, of the remaining zombies.
Yeah, as we all know, if you're a good tracker, you can spell a helicopter a mile away. So yeah, Daryl's pretty good on picking that one up. But that's it. They really let Zach die, like not easily. Like they could have shot him and end his suffering, but they just let him kind of put the zombies go to town on Zach's body there.
Yeah,
well, they didn't have to worry about a helicopter falling on their heads.
Yeah.
They had that close up of him like biting into the tendons of his back leg. That was pretty gruesome.
So this whole time with the episode, we're cutting back between this story and Rick's story, which is much quieter, much more contemplative, and very interesting. So Rick is checking the traps, and he finds what looks like a boar. I think it was a boar that was caught in a trap. It was kind of hard to tell the way they shot it, but some animal. When he sees a zombie come out of the woods and start looking at the boar, and it takes a second before she turns around. I think she says, "Please help me," and we realize this person's either alive or, like I was kind of convinced for the first 20 minutes, Rick is hallucinating again. But this is a very decrepit, zombie-looking, English-speaking woman. She appears to be Irish, from what I could tell, maybe Scottish, but I'm pretty sure it was Irish.
She's Carrie Condon. She's an Irish actress. It was what seemed to be an Irish dialect. It was certainly British. I guess.
It was certainly from that empire, yes. But a thicker accent too. It wasn't your standard Irish accent. It was maybe more of a Highlands Irish accent. But anyway,
listeners will fill us in on what that accent was.
Now, when this character was introduced, did anybody here think that was going to end well?
No,
No,
not at all.
Okay, all right,
This
good.
is The Walking Dead, Jim.
All right, I just want to make sure I was on the same page as everyone else, because as soon as she showed up, I'm like, yeah, this isn't good.
But I was waiting for it any second. Rick to realize he's been talking to a zombie for an hour. Like that's what I was waiting for.
Yeah, I thought she was real the whole time. It's just I didn't see a scenario where she'd be joining up with the prison group at all, even regardless of what the state of her husband was. So.
Because we know the prison group hates the Irish.
That's the reason. That's the horrible,
Just like Gangs of New York.
Horrible
exactly. All the hats they're wearing. It's great.
So she asks Rick for help, and she asks if he has a group. He says yes. She begs him to take her and her husband Eddie into the group. She said they've had a really hard time out here scavenging in the wilderness. It's just not been going well for them, and they would really appreciate if they could come back. And so she takes Rick back to her campsite, and they walk for a while and they talk. And we learn there's kind of a 3-question interview process to join the prison group now. We've kind of much more democratized it since we last left. And there's 3 questions. The questions are, how many zombies have you killed? How many people have you killed? And why? And so they discuss this. They discuss whether you can come back from the horrible things you've had to do. She explains to Rick that Eddie was the one who kind of got her through the situation and helped her come to terms with the horrible things she would have to do to destroying zombies and killing people when they had to protect themselves, etc. They finally get back to the campsite, to her small campsite, and she crashes over what looked to me like a cradle. I was thinking it was going to turn out as a kid. But as Rick is kind of looking in another direction, she moves to attack him. He sidesteps, and instead she decides to commit suicide, and she stabs herself in the stomach. And we realize that Eddie is dead and has been zombified, and is just apparently a head in a bag. We never actually see him, which I thought was actually a nice bit of restraint and kind of cool. And the whole question is, can you come back from what you've done? And she pleads with Rick, please don't kill me. I want to remain a walker with Eddie so we can be together. And he honors her wish and leaves, but not before she tells him, you can't come back from what you've done. And so that's kind of the whole central question for Rick. Can he come back from what he's done? Can the group come back from what they've done? Can they become society and not just a group of killers?
Here's my kind of issue with this scene. Now, there's nothing wrong with the actors. There's nothing wrong with the idea of the scene, and it's certainly interesting in how it plays out. I like this episode as a whole, and this plot's not it's not problematic in any way. It's just I feel like I've seen this kind of stuff from Rick's character before, and for a season premiere, we're spending a lot of time on this kind of repeated beat when we could be dealing with other things. I mean, we have to do a lot of table setting for what the season is. We could be dealing with more of Rick's relationship to the rest of the group, and not some random character that we're getting for one time only. It just feels like I'm getting a lot of the same thing again. I get what the show's doing, and it's obviously showing us something that relates to the main kind of thesis of the series, involving people doing horrible things in a horrible time and dealing with that, let alone survival and what have you. But it just again, it's not that I dislike the events that played out. It just feels like we're somewhat spinning wheels in what is the first episode of a new season.
What I appreciated about it was it showed us Rick's new perspective. At the end of season 3, season 3, Rick went crazy. He kept seeing glory. He yelled and screamed at Tyrese and them to get the hell out. All that stuff is going on. Now it seems like he's definitely rationalized all that. Time has gone by. He's able to kind of compartmentalize that and realize that you really can't come back from that kind of stuff. You're just a different person now. And I appreciated that part of it. But I definitely get what you're saying, Aaron. It seems like kind of a diversion from the more interesting parts of the show. Where we're definitely like you said, we're table setting. We're seeing new characters. We're seeing what the new status quo is, that kind of thing. So
that's fair. I guess it's just because this is the first episode of season 4. So I get we have to establish where Rick is now. It feels like I'm seeing something I've seen on the show before with Rick. When there's other things that could happen. If it happened like on the next episode or something like that, then maybe I would have been more accepting of this plot. But again, it is Andrew Lincoln does a solid job. I like Carrie Condon. I like she was on the HBO show Rome, which I was a huge fan of. I think she's a good actress, and I was happy to see her pop in for an episode of Walking Dead with her. So it's well acted. It's well shot and everything. I think Greg Nicotero does a good job of for being the horror guru that he is, and for in terms of makeup, seeing just like Eddie's head in a bag and not actually seeing the head and seeing kind of like Jordan mentioned, just restraints on how that situation played out. I was pleased with how it was put together. It's just overall wasn't as huge a fan of this kind of subplot in this episode as I could have been.
Yeah, I kind of agree with both of you a little bit in that I agree, Aaron. Maybe this would have been better in episode 2 or 3, but at the same time, I needed this type of plot line, this type of subplot to establish Rick's psyche at this point. Because like I said, when she showed up, I assumed Rick was seeing things again. And to have a plot line that not only shows that no, he's not hallucinating still, or at least as far as we know, and he seems to be handling things that seem very insane in a very rational way was good. It was good to see that 6-7 months have really done well for him, and that he is a very different person. He's a matured person, and he has moved on from that section of his life. Now, maybe you're right, and I think you probably are. I would prefer to see this in episode 2 or 3, but then again, we don't know what's going to happen in episode 2 or 3. Maybe this was the only place it fits. It'll be one of those things that in retrospect we'll know, I guess.
Exactly.
But I thought it worked definitely for what it was. I thought it was important to have. Maybe it would have been better somewhere else, but we don't know yet.
Yeah, it does come with recapping a show on a weekly basis. We just don't know where things are going to go. I feel like we could have, like Andrea's plot from last year, we might have been more accepting of. I mean, I might have been. I know some of you guys were more on Andrea's side than others, but I might have been more accepting of what she was going through if I knew where that arc was taking her the whole time. Even if I still probably did in retrospect. But yeah, it comes with kind of weekly recapping the show. Yeah, we might look upon this scene as like that was pivotal to the whole season later on, but right now we don't know. So that's just how I got to go about it.
When the governor shows up armed with only heads and bags,
exactly.
It was all set up. So we also have this plot line going through the episode with Patrick, remember Phineas from Phineas and Ferb, and he's not feeling quite well, and we have a scene where Carol is having story time for the various kids, many of whom are very annoying. I can't stress how much I hate children, and apparently they don't get any better after the post-apocalypse, but she's doing story time, and that ends with knife fighting lessons, which apparently Rick is not supposed to know about, which I'm not surprised, because that's not the type of thing I would want to tell them about either, although it's probably smart to be doing. These kids are going to have to defend themselves at some point. Might as well start them young.
I wonder if the idea was proposed to the council, which I can't wait to see in action in some episode.
I hope they have robes.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's the only note I had about the council. They better have robes. But I'm curious if Carol brought the idea to the council and they rejected it, or she brought it to Rick and he rejected it, or if there's any further history behind Carol starting her extracurricular activities with kids about survival, defense, rather than just kind of sneaking off and suddenly doing it. I'm curious how that's going to go.
Right. We have, after the group gets back from the big spot, the Costco-style building, it falls on Daryl to inform Beth that Zach died, and she takes it pretty well. I've seen some people on Facebook and stuff saying she's coming across like a sociopath, and while I get what they're saying, I don't think that's the case. They talked a bit about it on The Talking Dead, but even if they hadn't, we've seen her deal with death a bunch of times through the series, and this seems to me like a pretty logical progression. She contemplated suicide at a point. She had to deal with the loss of almost her entire family. And remember, that was a big family that she had to deal with the loss of, and friends, and her boyfriend Jimmy back in season 2.
Jimmy!
And, yeah, good old Jimmy. And I think this feels like a logical progression where basically she's saying, at this point, I can't just go into mourning every time somebody dies. I'm not saying goodbye to anybody anymore. If they die, they die. I'm going to feel bad about it, but I'm not going into mourning. I'm not crying about it anymore. Life has to go on. And to me, that doesn't come across as sociopath so much as just, dulled to the pain at a certain point. She's just kind of had to get over it.
For sure. And I mean, I think compared to Carl, who's become like a living symbol of Hank Hill's That Boy Ain't Right. I mean, I don't think I don't think Beth having a super meltdown at the sight of some boy that she liked dying, as opposed to maybe earlier in the time of the Walker infestation, this kind of thing happening. I don't think her being numb to the situation really suggests that she, is a sociopath, or is. I've seen people accusing her of being the one that's leading walkers to the camp, things like that. Like, it doesn't seem to add up to me at this point.
Yeah, I agree completely. And then finally for the episode, we catch up with Patrick again, who,
Oh,
like
wait
I
a
said,
minute,
wasn't
real quick,
feeling
we
well.
also find out why this episode's called 30 Days Without an Accident.
Oh, yes, that's right. Beth has one of those old-fashioned X days without an accident signs you might find in a warehouse. It was on 30, and she takes it back down to 0.
It seemed like a new living version of Facebook. That's what she was going for.
Does it have emoticons that you can hand?
It's like if anyone watches the League, Taco has a living Facebook thing, and that's what I think Beth was trying to replicate here.
Right. Oh, Yobagoya. Anyway, so like I said, there's Patrick, and he wasn't feeling well earlier. We catch up with him again. He gets up in the middle of the night to not use the bathroom, but he just seems to be feeling very ill. He goes into the shower area, which is where they used to have was it the boiler room that we saw last season? The room where they killed like Andrew and stuff.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like if I had to guess on where they had that.
Yeah, I forget what the room was, but it's that same room. And he goes and they've got a pump action shower all set up there, and he stands under the water for a few seconds before he passes out, falls over, cracks his head, and dies. And the episode ends with us seeing that Patrick is now among the living dead.
Bum, bum, bum.
I want to point this out because I did watch the episode multiple times, so I could do the written right up and just because I like watching the show and it repeats itself. When Patrick dies, his eyes are all bloodied. That's something like basically all the orifices on his face are all bloodied up. And this is important because Rick also sees a walker that like at the beginning of the episode, and when he gets back from the whole Clara incident, like he sees the same walker, which also has blood all coming out of his eyes and his ears and stuff. So whatever's going on, which obviously I think everyone believes is some kind of disease or plague that's going to be making more of a presence in future episodes, it's out there, and the show's done a good job of setting it up as slowly as it has.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was a continuity thing or if that was just a stylistic choice. But now that you mention it, I mean, I do remember Rick saying that them specifically showing walkers with eyes, and orifices bleeding and stuff.
Yeah, I think Jordan, you actually tweeted, you said that zombie has like cataracts or something like that. I think you put that out during the episode.
Oh, that's true. I forgot I tweeted that, but you're absolutely correct.
Because I made a joke about that zombie with my friends when I was watching it the first time, and then that same zombie came back at the end of the episode, and it had the same kind of the eyes are all bleeding and stuff. So it's showing that one in particular for a reason. And then it's like, all right, so something's going on. Maybe it's meat, maybe it's in the air. There's a whole lot of ideas that the show presents you with, like the dead pigs and what have you. So.
Well, yeah, and I would remind listeners, remember, everybody's infected, which means if you die for any reason, you come back as a zombie. Whatever's going on doesn't have to be some super zombie virus or anything like that. It could just be a really bad strain of the flu or malaria or pick your poison. All it has to be is something that can kill you, and you can come back, and presumably also transferable from pigs to humans. So that could be swine flu. That could also just be really bad E. coli, for all we know, or hoof and mouth or something like that. I don't know my pig diseases very well.
So if it is the flu, are we going to see the cast of The Stand walking the other way?
Maybe if Darabont was leading the show, but I don't think so right now with Gimple.
Or if it's like Contagion, we'll see another grisly death for Gwyneth Paltrow. So.
She just shows up to die, and then her head is in a box. Spoilers. Editor's note. All right, folks, as you're about to hear, at this point in the episode, my mic connection got a bit loopy, let's just say. Bad connection in some way. I don't know how it happened. As you can hear now, the microphone is working just fine, so don't worry about this happening again. But for the rest of the episode, my mic quality is not as good as it normally is. I apologize, but we still have a lot of good stuff to talk about. A lot of people have been calling attention to the fact that when he shakes hands with Daryl, Daryl licks his fingers clean because he's eating deer or he's eating one of the pigs. I forget off the top of my head. Daryl licks his fingers clean and then they shake hands. So did Daryl pass anything on to him? Well, if so, then why isn't Daryl dead? I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things where we can speculate all we want, but we might as well just wait a week or two to find out what's going on.
It's certainly one of the better mysteries I think the show's kind of set up because there's so many different possibilities for what it could be, let alone how it's going to play out with the rest of the season. I mean, we already have walkers, a crazy governor on the loose, and whatever else is going on out there. So now we have some kind of mystery disease. I think it's like, oh man, things don't get better on The Walking Dead.
So, I mean, we talked about this in the beginning, so I'll reiterate now and kind of explain more what I was saying. I liked this episode in retrospect. At the time I watched it, though, I was a little bit bored up until, we started having the zombies falling through the roof. But I think it was important because it lulled us into that false sense of security. It showed us how well things have been going. It showed us how much of a well-oiled machine this group has become. And I think that was important to kind of put us off base and be like, what the hell is going on? Why is everything so peachy? Not that it's great, but, comparatively, why is everything going so well and going so slow? So when they have zombies falling from the ceiling and people dying in the shower room and all these things, it needs to be jarring. And I think in retrospect, it did exactly what it needed to do. And maybe being boring for the first 20 minutes was actually very purposeful.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was necessarily bored about what was going on within the first 20 minutes because I was interested to see what the status quo would be. But I understand what you're saying about kind of the pacing being it's slower, and yeah, it's certainly not starting you in the midst of action. But I mean, I like that. I was happy with getting up to speed before things were, not needing to necessarily see kind of a zombie attack happen or anything. But I mean, actually, we did get the zombie kills within the first 20 minutes of this episode. But I mean, it felt right to me of just what the show needed to do in an effort to kind of set things up on their way. I had less issue with the opening, which seemed like a requirement to me versus kind of the Rick stuff, which I already talked about later on.
Yeah, I thought it was a good, like showing them, with the gardening and setting up housekeeping, quote unquote, or whatever. I thought it was a good status quo to introduce chaos into. I think if it had been just chaos, and then we'd had more chaos, it just wouldn't have worked as well as it did in this episode. So, I mean, they actually have something to lose now. I guess would be the best way to put it.
What I enjoy is that the cast is very comfortable on screen, which I think is something that's admirable for a series like this, which is largely popular because of the zombie mayhem that happens. But you have scenes with Norman Reedus and Melissa McBride, who they're just like old pros at this point. They kind of share a very solid chemistry that you enjoy seeing, regardless of what the relationship status is. Oh my god, I mean, it works. And even with newer characters like Karen and Tyrese, for example, they fit into this universe and they feel natural, and that's something I can admire about a series like this that has such fantastical elements going on within it.
I also really enjoyed that the writing seemed to be very sharp and on target, with the exception of some of the stuff with the little kids, which again, super annoying. But this was, for me, a good start in that even though it was a pilot, not a pilot, but a season premiere, and needed to set up a bunch of storylines, it focused much more on individual characters. Rick had a story, and then the rest of the people had a story that focused mostly on Daryl and a little bit with Bob and stuff, but it was mostly Daryl in that group, and it didn't have to spend 10 minutes with every character, where, 3 minutes here, 3 minutes there. It touched on just about everybody, but only in passing, and then the stories, for the most part, were just a few characters. Not quite to the level of, 18 Miles Out or Clear, but definitely on the right track, which is exactly what we've been asking for. And I think that'll be a lot easier to do once you're not in the season premiere. But if this is the premiere equivalent of that, I'm super happy with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope that's kind of a hallmark of what Gimble's going to bring to the table. I mean, especially considering he wrote Clear, which is, like I said, probably my favorite episode of last season that focused on a smaller group of characters rather than trying to fit everyone in, like you say, Jordan.
I'll certainly say Clear is maybe my favorite episode of the series next to the pilot, but a few others. I put Clear probably high up there. But with that said, yeah, as much as I like seeing the very focused episodes with only some characters involved, I mean, I like seeing this ensemble. I think there's a good cast here, so I like seeing them all in action, and I think the show does a good job of utilizing them in this episode. And I agree with you. I think the writing does support that statement. I think the only kind of clunky scene involves kind of showing us who Bob is, where Sasha just literally lays out everything about what this character is. But besides that, I mean, I think it did a good job of just kind of setting the stage while incorporating the entire ensemble, and then leading on to two distinct subplots that go on with Rick and then the supply run gang.
So how many busters would you give this episode, gentlemen?
I give this 4 out of 5 busters. I thought it was a solid season premiere. I like, for the most part, the way it introduced the new characters. I like the episode overall. I thought it was strong, and except for I had a few misgivings that Aaron touched on, like I said about the the Rick plot with the woman in the woods or whatever. But other than that, I thought it was pretty solid overall. So 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I completely agree. I say 4 out of 5. I mean, like, as much as I love Breaking Bad, and I know you guys love Breaking Bad too, like, it's just among the best series of all time for me. It's knowing that like a series like that exists. It's fun to get back to The Walking Dead, which I know is not for me at least. It's not like my favorite show, but it's a show I like watching. It's a show I like having fun talking about. So I felt like this episode did a solid job. It's a strong episode that does a lot of things The Walking Dead tends to do right. It does those quite well. So strong 4 out of 5 for me.
I will make it the hat trick and also go with a 4 out of 5. I think this is exactly what I want from the show in terms of tone and focus. Did it do everything perfectly? No, but I think it made up for that with the action set pieces, or set piece, with the helicopter and the raining zombies. A lot of really cool stuff there. There was some little things like with the kids and stuff like that got on my nerves, but in general, this seemed more focused. The writing seemed more on target. And I'm excited for the season. I think this episode is an omen of good things to come, and I certainly hope I'm right. Jim, what did our listeners on Facebook think of this episode?
Well, it was pretty positive overall. By the way, if you'd like to join the discussion on our Facebook group, it is the Walking Dead TV podcast group on Facebook. Just submit a request and join in the conversation. We have a lot of great people in our Facebook group, and we appreciate their input. We got a lot of great comments on this episode. Ian Tim said it was a bit slow and a bit weird. Mike Jones, a steady listener, I love it already. Seems much creepier of a show now. Leslie Johnson said it was a great start and thinks we're looking at a fantastic year. Tammy Ricketson was great. It's going to be an awesome season. Paul Gaona said I'm loving the slow build. It's Walking Dead. They've yet to disappoint me. Echo Alpha said he was very honest that he liked it because it was calmed down. And it doesn't always have to be a big flamboyant opening. And he thought it was great. Jared Bernard liked the feel of the episode. Michael Santana said this is going to be the season that the others aspired to be. And Aaron Newer said, did anyone else spot Bill Murray zombie? I did not, Aaron. Please enlighten me.
It was early on in the episode. It was one of the fence walkers like approaching the fence. I saw it and I just said, Bill Murray zombie. And then I saw it a couple more times. Like, that's definitely Bill Murray zombie. Just looked like it.
Linda Clark Ake says, who can go for Daryl? Seriously, we need to see Grandma slipping in panties. He has the whole apocalypse package. Luke Smith FX, great start to the season. Can't wait to see how the whole swine flu disease story arc pans out. Everard Santa Maria, after rethinking and seeing other people's observations, he thinks it's going in a direction a la Lost, and this will be a conspiracy theorist dream show. I don't know about that. Crystal Cornelius said, I give it 3.5. It's raining men zombies out of 5. Robert Negro gives it 3.5 out of 5 as well. Mike Jones is a 4.5 out of 5. We had a lot of really good comments, a lot of positive comments on the Facebook group. Seems like everybody really enjoyed the season opener.
Can I say something real quick about the Facebook group?
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
I love the Facebook group. Like,
I do too. I'm really enamored with our fans.
It gets a little like slow during the summer, obviously, just because there's no new episodes for the show. But I mean, with the past few weeks, as things been kicked back into gear, everyone just has such a great time on that show. And there's no real mean spiritedness going on there. Everyone just generally, regardless of how they feel about the show, they just generally want to talk about it and have a good time and post fun comments. And I love interacting with the various people on the Facebook page. It's just a fun place to do it. So if you want to get on there, certainly go for it. But good job all the fans on the Facebook page or the likes or whatever. I mean, that's just
absolutely. It's a lot higher level of discourse or than most other Facebook groups or forum groups or whatever. I mean, like you said, Aaron, it's very very welcoming and not trolly in any way. A lot of good theories flying out around there about the tainted deer meat or whether Beth is psychotic like Jordan said earlier or whatever. So yeah, definitely I recommend anybody who enjoys the podcast definitely join our Facebook group. There's a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of good people, a lot of insight there. I really enjoyed it too.
Just watch out for Mike Jones though. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
super fan, Mike Jones.
So let's talk about what the rest of the country thought about this episode, or at least in terms of how many people tuned in. Yet again, not really surprising at this point, but The Walking Dead set yet another ratings record. This episode was the most watched episode of the show ever. 16.1 million people watched the premiere, highest rated episode of the series, highest rated episode of any basic cable television series ever. The episode became the #1 telecast among adults 18 to 49 this broadcast season, including sports. Let me make that clear. Not just of scripted shows. We're including sports now. That's how big this premiere was. That is awesome.
It's amazing. I know we talked about it before. It's like almost every other TV show works in the opposite way. They get the big group on, or they get the big number on premiere, and then as the show goes on to a second season or third season, they tend to lose viewers by attrition. Walking Dead is entirely the opposite of that. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. It just seems to be getting to be a bigger and bigger juggernaut as it goes on. I think it's kind of amazing. It's almost like a mirror image of what happened with the comic too. I mean, the comic started out as very it's not popular but not incredibly popular, and it just gained a snowball of popularity as time went on. And we're seeing the same thing happen with the show. I think it's pretty great.
Gentlemen, should we close this one out and head into our preview of next week?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, as usual, if you don't want to know anything about next week's episode, well then listen to the outro and then you can be on your way. But if you don't mind hearing some very vague information about next week's episode, please feel free to say one. We're also going to talk about a little bit of casting news that we've heard. If you check out the episode that posted, I believe yesterday, or maybe the day before, depending on when this one goes up, we posted the audio from New York Comic Con 2013. I still don't have the information. If you gave that to us, I apologize. We'll try to remember next week and give them credit there. But there's some casting news that came out of that, and we'll talk about that after our little closer here. So until next time, if you want to leave us a voicemail, you can do that at 516-468-7912. That's 516-468-7912, or send us an email, comments@walkingdeadtv.com. That's comments@walkingdeadtv.com. Check out hhwlod.com for all of our great shows like Half Hour Wasted, One Box of Doom, Black Box, Out Now, our brand new shows, Jersey Shore, Really BS, and many others. There's a lot of great stuff there at hhwlod.com. Follow us on Twitter at WDTV Podcast and at HHWLOD_network. And of course, we already mentioned the Facebook groups where there is a ton of fun conversation. So until there's no more room left in hell and the dead walk the earth, remember, you can always become a farmer in the apocalypse. It's a viable option. Have a good week, everybody. And next week on The Walking Dead, episode 402 is entitled Infected. And our brief synopsis from AMC is a brand new enemy has the group fighting to protect the life they've built at the prison. And that'll air next Sunday. So we don't know a whole lot about that, but we do know some casting news that I was super, super excited about. And I know Aaron was as well. We already knew Christian Stratos would be playing the part of Rosita Espinosa in season 4, and we were excited because, and we were vague about this, that might mean that 2 other characters will show up. Well, now we know for sure that those other 2 characters will be showing up. We have Michael Cudlitz from Southland, who will be playing Army Sergeant Abraham Ford, and his mustache, a character I'm super excited to see. Abraham is awesome, at least in the comics. And the little guy who's got a handlebar mustache, they're just cool. And if somebody's got the stones to bust one out, well, then quite frankly, they've earned their keep. We also have Josh McDermott from Retired 35, who will be playing the role of Dr. Eugene Porter. These 3 characters, Rosita, Eugene, and Abraham, all showed up at the same time in the comics. It looks like they will be doing the same thing here. Again, I don't want to spoil anything with characters, but I like all 3. I'm super excited about Abe, though. Abe is just awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Abe character from the comics. I'm a big fan of actor Michael Cudlitz. He's a very, very solid character actor who was on Southland, and I actually legit thought that he'd make a good Abe before this was ever announced. So the idea of him actually being on the show satisfies me to no extent. But yeah, I'm very excited to see all 3 of them enter into the series.
I love how they're stacking the deck with a lot of good character actors too. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a couple actors from The Wire, everything can just be better. That's a model that makes no sense. But yes, I'm going to stick with it.
Alright, so I think that's it for this episode. Check out next week when we talk about Infected. Check out HHWLOD.com for all of our great shows. You can hear Gemini on LOD. You can hear me on Jersey Shore. You can hear Aaron on Out Now with Aaron and Abe, our weekly new release movie podcast. Lots of great stuff on HHWLOD.com. Hope you enjoy it, and have a good week, everybody. So I can't decide whether I'm going to end up doing It's Raining Men or It's Raining Blood for this week's ending music.
Oh, it's Raining Men, no question.
Yeah, but then I found a mashup of the two that I was like, this is pretty cool.
Oh, well, if it's a cool matchup, then, burn the legend, right?
And there was a third song that now I'm forgetting that I was like, oh, that would also be perfect.
The Man Who Fell to Earth.
I like how clever the nation felt as every one of them made a Raining Men joke.
Including myself.
What my friend did next to me, which made me laugh because I wasn't on Twitter or anything. I didn't hear it 70 more times. But it was fitting, is the only way. So
Yeah.
you explain that scene.
And this is episode 98, I believe, right?
Wow, hitting a lot of milestones. It's had 250 on LOD and now 100 on this.
I'm at 125 next week, and I'm now. As far as numbered episodes go, I know we have like 160 or something.
I gotta tell you, man, I love the Knights episodes. I really do.
That's great to hear. Thanks, Joe.
I really enjoyed it a lot. The last one with Scott and Jordan about gravity.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that a lot.
It's fun having that kind of freeform area, and I just don't want to, I don't want to post it on iTunes with the other just